Sir, should we start?
Yeah, it's 4 o'clock. Shall we begin, or should I wait for our General Secretary?
No, sir, we should start.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So I think we can begin with the program.
Yes. So, may I request Dr. Murali Krishnan, sir, Joint Secretary of iSPELL, to start the event formally. Please, sir.
Thank you, Pramod. Now, good evening to all of you. This is another edition of Sunday Sahityak Satsang. And as we are aware, every Sunday evening, we have this meeting, especially related to literature and literary subjects. And it's a privilege for me, being a being the Joint Secretary of iSPELL, to lead and to begin with a particular session on this particular platform related to Sahityak Satsang. Now, we all know, like, people from various parts of the country do join us for this particular program, and by around 4:30 we will have many people in this particular platform. Now, today we have Dr. Santosh, who is the key, the main speaker, I should say, or the resource person for the day. He is an associate professor of English. He is from Payyanur College, Kannur district, Kerala, and it's a privilege for me to invite him to this particular platform, to this edition of Sahityak Satsang. Before I invite him, it is my duty to introduce Dr. Santosh BM to the August audience who are part of this webinar. Now, Dr. Santosh took his graduation, post-graduation, as well as PhD from University of Calicut. He is a JRF holder, and he also took MBA from Pondicherry Central University. He has an experience of teaching and research of around 25 years. And he is a well-known, renowned soft skill and human resource development trainer for various organizations, bodies, and groups. And he is also the coordinator of IQAC of his college. And he is a regular invitee for the orientation programs at UGC, HRDC, Academic Staff College of Kerala University. He was a member of the PG Board of Studies of English, as well as the UG Board of Studies of Kannur University during 2015. Now, he is a research guide in English of Kannur University. He has produced many scholars who got PhD under his guidance. Now, he has presented papers in various international and national seminars, and he has published around more than 15 articles in various journals and books. And he has also published a book titled Narrative History Postcoloniality. It is published by Emerald Publishers in Chennai. And thus, as you can see from his biodata, he has a very long listed kind of academic credentials. So it's really fortunate for iSPELL to have Dr. V.M. Santosh in this particular platform. So on behalf of all those who have gathered here, Dr. Santosh, my friend, I'm extremely glad and delighted to invite you. And now the platform is all yours. So we will begin with the session without much of a formality. So Dr. Santosh, you can please move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Murali Krishnan sir. I hope I am audible. No, properly.
Yeah,
audible.
Yes, sir. You are audible and visible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So a month back, I had a call from Murali Krishnan sir, who is a very good friend of mine, and it was a kind of compulsion that I have to do a session here on the iSPELL platform, SSS platform. And when Murali Krishnan sir says, I cannot say no, because that's a kind of relationship between us. And he sent me the links of a few videos, the YouTube links of the programs which were already over. And I just went through some 4 or 5 sessions, and I'm extremely delighted to be a part of this body and this program, because normally there is a spree of webinars. We know webinar is one great contribution by the COVID-19 pandemic, as we say, and there is an overdose of webinars. And normally, seminars and webinars are conducted for various reasons, I would say, and the academic reasons are not often highlighted. Maybe we have to score points, for that we attend the seminars, or the government is giving funding, so we are organizing seminars like that. But this is really a platform where people join together with only one commitment, that is the academic commitment. There are no other personal intentions, there are no other personal gains. So this is purely a platform for exchanging ideas so that we get elevated academically. And and because of this reason, it's my real pleasure to be part of this program. And don't take me as a resource person. We all of us are really resource persons. Now I'll be sharing with you some thoughts on the post-colonial debates with you. That's what I intend. And after my presentation, or even during my presentation, at any point you can intervene, make your comments, or if you want to correct me, counter me, help me, anything is welcome, because we are all equals on this platform. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll share that right now, and we will go by that, so that it will be structured, more structured. I hope it is visible now.
Yeah, it is visible, sir.
Yeah, okay. So this octopus man, the white octopus, can be taken as an ideal image for talking about this on this topic. So the post-colonial debate. Okay. And when we speak about post-colonialism, we can only start from the colonial period. So I have given these landmarks as far as world history is concerned. In the initially 1 or 2 slides, I'll be trying to trace the evolution of colonialism, which is the foundation, I should say, for the post-colonial debates. So 1476 is a very crucial year. Normally we say that from 500 to around 1400 we have the medieval period, which is the period of feudalism, the period where faith was dominating. And precisely 476, the historical relevance is that that was the year in which the Western Roman Empire collapsed. And from there we make a jump to 1400, the Renaissance, or that period, 1650, the period of Renaissance, the period of reason, where the anthropocentric ideas are highlighted, the potential of human beings is celebrated. And one significant year also I mentioned there, that's 1453, the fall of, or the siege of Constantinople, the fall of the Byzantine or the Eastern Roman Empire, which lasted for about 1500 years. So these are just milestones which would help us in understanding understanding colonialism better, or the philosophy of the colonial discourse better. Then, so, these are the European navigators, or we'll be talking about navigation, the European navigation, which paved the way for colonialism. We call such journeys, those journeys, the voyages of discovery. The 2 years are important. One is 1421, when Henry, who is called the navigator, nicknamed the navigator of Portugal, established it should be established, I'm sorry for the spelling, typing error, the school of navigation. And that was the beginning of the global maritime exploration by the European powers. Then in the 1430s, we have the Portuguese navigators exploring the west coast of Africa. So that was the beginning, and we have a few significant navigators. Why they are significant, I'll tell you. John Cabot, who lived in the 15th century, an Italian navigator who is credited with the discovery of the parts of North America in 1497. Then Amerigo Vespucci, by whom the continent is named, 1454 to 1512. Again, another Italian navigator who discovered America, Brazil, and the West Indies. Then Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506. Again, another Italian who made 4 voyages across the Atlantic with the primitive navigation technologies available at that time. Then we have the Vasco da Gama, who reached our land, a Portuguese who came from Europe to Asia, coming to Asia, crossing, Africa, crossing the Bermuda Triangle. That was a very Herculean task that time, but Vasco da Gama did it. Then Ferdinand Magellan, who again a Portuguese, who circumnavigated the earth. They are the major navigators, and there were a number of them. Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, a number of them, a number of other navigators. But these people have made landmark achievements. That's why I have listed only them. So the point is that the beginning of the entire colonial mission we can find in the around the mid 15th century. Okay. Just some problem with the slide transition. Please excuse me. Okay, so this is the colonial map of around 1700. We see these are these colors indicate the lands colonized, and we find white colored areas, a lot of white colored areas. Then by the next, just by around 1900, in around 200 years, we see that almost say 90%, more than almost 90% of the land is colonized by different European powers, be it Belgium, Germany, Italy, Portugal, even USA has a share by 1900 in the colonial mission. Then France, Great Britain, Netherlands, Spain, other independent states colonizing other countries. So in 200 years, roughly 200 years, or even before that map, we can say starting from around say 1500 to 1900, the 400 years, colonialism became a perceptible reality in every nook and corner of the world. It was such a massive impact it had. And colonialism, as we know, this is another cartoon, as we know, is a kind of exploiting the wealth of the colonized lands. Needless to say, all of us are aware about that. There is a speech made by Shashi Tharoor, writer and parliamentarian, who says that when the British came to India, India's share in the world GDP was around 26%, but after 200 years, when Britain left, that 26% was reduced to just 4% of the world GDP. So it was a kind of and we know Dadabhai Naoroji and scholars like him, coming with the drain theory, where they explain that the resources of the colonized lands have been very effectively using high-end technology, have been drained off by the European powers. Okay. Okay. Then another important point that we have to discuss, an important juncture in the history of the world that we have to address or pay attention to when we discuss colonialism is Enlightenment, which is called the long 18th century, it's said. And what are the contributions or impact made by Enlightenment as far as the colonial mission was concerned? It concretized reason. Enlightenment argued for reason, even though individual freedom was upheld. Then social phenomena. Enlightenment explained the social phenomena in terms of human reason, scientific inquiry. So we call it the scientific revolution. Experimentation and formation of universally valid general laws. And there we will find the foundation of the liberal humanist ideology, which served a great deal as a very strong foundation of colonialism. And it also laid the foundation of Eurocentrism, and this was the image projected through various discourses, including literature, that Europe is a continent which has progress, which is changing, which is updating, and which is moving forward in a linear pattern. And the Asiatic, and what is the pattern, we will discuss after just the last line of that section we will find. Whereas the Asiatic society or the non-European society, the African society, that is changeless, that is a frozen kind of society. Hence, it has no history. Only if you have, if you undergo change, you have history. If you stand somewhere frozen, you have no past, you have no future, you have only the present. So your non-European countries are yet to reach the world of science. This is what they said. The movement is generally from paganism or superstition or magic to religion. In the Middle Ages, you find them, and the first classification that I said also, that was by the Europeans. That may be the contradiction of this kind of an argument always. So from paganism, superstition, you move on to religion, and from there you advance to science. In the post-Renaissance period, you advance to science, Renaissance was the beginning, and we will find the scientific temper attaining maturity in the Enlightenment ideas. And with that, they put forth the idea of the white man's burden, the burden of changing non-European countries, non-European people from superstition or magic or paganism to science and reason. So this duty, they said, was vested with the West or the Orientalists in that sense. I'm taking from Said. Okay, and when we speak about the colonial mission, it has two phases. The real act of physical domination, one. Second thing, creating the colonial mindsets by intellectual or psychological interpellation. And for this, they use the conception of modernity put forth by Enlightenment rationality. So we are making you modern. I go back to that point, the white man's burden. We are making you modern. We are taking you to the path of progress. We are taking you to science. we are taking you to material advancements. So that was a kind of ideological, psychological brainwashing. So domination is there. That is only one part. Supporting domination or working in tandem with domination was the ideological, psychological, intellectual interpellation through different discourses like law, social institutions, entertainment, literature, and the like. And as Ashcroft, I'm sorry, as Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin said, they're quoting Homi Baba. They said that the colonized is constructed. Just look at the lines highlighted in blue. We can read the other things also, but I want you to focus on that. The colonized is constructed. The word constructed is very important within a disabling master discourse of colonialism, which specified a degenerate native population to justify its conquest and subsequent rule. I've taken this from the Empire Writes Back, written by Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin. So we are constructed, we the colonized people are constructed in such a way that we have to justify the conquest, their conquest of us, and the continuing rule. And the Orientals, or the colonized people, they were quite unaware of that. They were living in a world constructed by the Occidental or colonial master discourses. Just a minute, I wrongly pressed this one. Yeah. And the colonial mission, the European colonial mission, always operated on two very, very powerful premises, but they are actually fallacious premises, I would say. One, European is a colony is made of an easily identifiable and discrete biological and social entity. Europeans form a natural community of common class interests, racial attributes, political affinities, and superior culture. European, they form a particular brand, and it is a superior brand. The second point was that the boundaries separating the Europeans from the non-Europeans, or the colonizer from the colonies, were very clearly evident, because they form they have a common class interests, they have racial attributes, the white attributes, they have political affinities, like say democracy, they are using, or they are that is in practice, and you don't have all these things. So there is a very clearly demarcated difference between we people and you people, the colonizer and the colonized. That was the premises upon which they operated. And I quote Edward Said also to establish that point here. The Orient was living in a thoroughly organized world of his own, a world with its own national, cultural, epistemological boundaries and principles of internal coherence. Yet, see the next point. What gave the Oriental's world its intelligibility and identity was not the result of his own, or say her, his own efforts, but rather the whole complex series of knowledgeable manipulations by which the Orient was identified the West. And as all of us know, the key argument of Said's Orientalism is this: the Orient is a construct of the Occident. The Orient is the result of a series of complex manipulations by the West. It doesn't exist there simply, rather it is a constituted entity, it's a constructed entity. Murali sir, I hope I am communicating.
Yeah, so you please continue, sir.
Okay. And the Eurocentric colonial discourses presented say the following ideas. One, they made the binaries of the Orient and the Occident, and they said that they are very as mentioned earlier, they are very clearly demarcated entities. So you have two categories, and there are reasons for the class. There are criteria for this kind of a classification, and you take all these criteria: the question of rationality, the question of civilization, the question of the ability to articulate, the question of intellectual acumen, the question of color, the question of your spirit, the question of your mobility, the question of your masculinity or your gender identity, the question of your scientificity, the question of say superstition. So when we take up all these the questions severally and do a kind of classification, a very clearly demarcated two categories will emerge, and one category of people, this is I'm talking about the arguments that the Europeans put forth, and one category of people, that is the Occidentals, the white, they always represented, or they always are presented to have possessing all the positive qualities. So they are presented as rational beings, whereas the Orientals, the non-Europeans, are presented as irrational. They are the Westerners or the Europeans are presented as civilized, as vocal, very articulate, as intellectually having intellectual caliber, as white, which is a color of beauty, then enthusiastic, mobile, always moving, like moving from past to present and to future, masculine. All these notions are to be debated and scientific, whereas the Oriental is presented as irrational, barbaric, not civilized, mute, not having the capacity to articulate. That's why you that is why you say you don't have good literature. That's why Macaulay said that a single shelf in a good European library is worth the entire literature of Asia and Arabia, right? So you are mute, you don't have the language to articulate, you are sensual, you are not intellectual, you are sensual, you are guided by your sense, not by your intellect. You are black, then you are dirty. In that sense, you are very lazy, not enthusiastic. You want things to come to you, you are not ready to go and catch it. You are static, you have no mobility, you are frozen, you are feminine, in the sense that you are weak. Then you are unscientific, you are magical, superstition, cruel, lustful, decadent, exotic, mystic, seductive, anonymous, aberrant, inferior. All these kinds of adjectives are used to qualify the Oriental. And that's why Said says that the Oriental man was first an Oriental, only then a man. So whatever, whether you are a man or a woman, whoever you are, anyway you are an Oriental. That's your primary identity. Everything else comes only secondary. And when I say when we say that a person is an Oriental, that means a person has all these inferior qualities. Then what was the modus operandi of the colonial discourse? They say, as per the mainstream colonial discourse, the West is leading the non-Western world into history. So just as we take the children by their hands, we lead them by holding their hands. The West is leading the non-West into history. Okay. And see, a very interesting fact is that the colonialism justified its civilizing mission by claiming that it was rescuing native women from the oppressive patriarchal domination. So we are saving your women from your men. That was the argument that they made. And in the cultural sphere, what they did, Robert Jung says that they tried to wipe out the Europeans tried to wipe out their tradition. There is the colonized people to substitute our language for theirs. Our is European and theirs here is the colonized, and destroy their culture without giving them ours. So we are destroying their culture. We are creating a feeling in them that their culture is inferior. So naturally, the Europeans created a feeling that the non-European culture is inferior. The people of Asia, the people of Africa developed a sense that they are inferior, their culture is inferior to the West, but they can only live their way. They have no alternative. Very few people may follow the British ways, but they cannot do that, for example, or the European ways, but majority cannot do that. So they were actually in a vacuum, having a feeling that I as an Indian, having a feeling that my culture is bad, but I cannot grab the or have the grasp of the Western culture, the European culture, British culture also. So what am I to do? I am in a state of limbo. I am in a state of crisis, negating my culture but not being able to accept the other culture. And having been thrown out of the history making process, they lose interest. The colonized people lose interest in the selfhood, and they accept the myth of intellectual, social, cultural, religious, even physical inferiority. So colonialism, this is one significant point. Colonialism tried to, or the colonial discourse tried to destroy the colonized culture by explaining it. That's very important. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of the muted, the voice of the colonized came out through the colonizers. It is through the eyes of the colonizer that even we read about ourselves, we read about our history. Our history has been constructed, the conventional, I'm talking about the conventional history, the foundations of which have been laid by the colonial historiography. So that is basically that framework. The framework of our history, the conventional history, is basically colonial. And so they were explaining us, and later we were trying to explain us using their tool, using their framework. And epistemologically, the major effect of Western imperial discourses practice was twofold. We will read only the green things. The other things we can ignore simply. Homogenization of the multifaceted native cultures. In Africa, actually, African continent were the continent of thousands of small tribes. A tribe having around 200, 300. Or less than 500 members, but the European and each and every tribe has different culture, has different language, has different kinship relationships, different food habits, everything is different. But the Europeans try to put every one of them, all these different divergent groups, under one umbrella of Africa. They called it Africans. Africans means you are black, you are good for nothing, you are irrational, you are uncivilized. It is there. The internal diversity has never been taken care of. So homogenization was one strategy, and they deliberately did this kind of homogenization, because when opposition comes, if it's a uniform kind of homogeneous kind of opposition, it's very easy to tackle it. Whereas when it comes in a very different way, different directions, different dimensions, it's difficult to manage. The second one was marginalization of this homogenized entity, say African or Indian, Asian, as the other, as savage, as irrational, inferior, and all the other terms that we have already discussed. Then neo-colonial hegemony, after the political liberation of the countries, neo-colonial hegemony also is working. It's just a side comment in the same line of the preceding colonial discourse. That also legitimizes monocentrism and homogeneity. Actually, neo-colonial hegemony, we know, is operating through global capital. So it is with the market interest that this kind of monocentrism, homogeneity is often celebrated. That is why we have the, say for example, the KFC food chain. We have all over the world, in all the countries. So a mono acculturation process is taking place, a kind of homogenization is taking place. People should have similar tastes, common tastes, so that you can sell the product very easily. Okay, then that Commonwealth issue, I'm leaving that for the time being. Then what happened, and where was the change? That is, so we have been talking about the colonial enterprise so far, but there was a change, and we can say the Second World War was a significant was a landmark as far as the as far as colonialism was concerned. There was an increasing urge for freedom and liberty after the Second World War. There are many reasons. One, the legitimacy of the power blocks underwent serious interrogation. The British domination came down. Britain's power, Britain's authority over the world dwindled considerably there. Then there are other factors also. Britain actually recruited soldiers from different colonies. So they gave assurance that after the war, freedom will be granted to those countries. India is a perfect example. So they had to keep the word. Then there was a growing spirit of democracy all over the world. So this colonialism, there was a feeling that colonialism is a very barbarous kind of practice. So all these things put together. Then another important thing was economically, Britain suffered a lot as a result of war, and they didn't have the resources to keep the colonies. That was also significant. Actually, initially they were exploiting the colonies and they were making money out of the colonies, but it has reached a point that no longer exploitation is no longer possible. Financial gain from the colonies is no longer possible. So there are economic reasons also for dropping most of the colonies. Okay, so the Third World thus started, as Fanon said, Third World thus started creating a history after the Second World War. And a few important points, the Indian independence, again, a few landmarks. Indian independence in 1947, India and Pakistan became independent. Then Sri Lanka and Burma became independent in the next year. Then Algerian War of Independence was another significant milestone as far as the political anti-colonial movements were concerned. Then the 1968 student rebellion of France, that was an anti-enlightenment movement that questioned the foundational spirits of enlightenment. All these paved the way for the emergence of the debate of post-colonialism and post-structuralism, the post-structuralist stream of thought, deconstruction. All these different ideas, different schools of thought or different streams of thought contributed to the rise of the post-colonial debate, the post-colonial discourse. The post-colonial discourse, and we have a few seminal books in that line. Things Fall Apart by Achebe in 1958, then The Wretched of the Earth by Fanon in 1961. Then, of course, Orientalism by Said in 1978. Then Empire Writes Back. This is actually, this has to be kept separately. They were actually tracing what was happening in the colonial world. Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin publishing the empire, the empire rights back in 89. Okay. Then when we speak about decolonization, there are three phases. One actually the two phases. The first two phases actually happened before the end of the Second World War itself. One was in the 18th century, where America, which was a colony of Britain once, declared the American Declaration of Independence. That was a great fillip for the nationalist movements in different parts of the country, especially in Africa and Asia. Then another important milestone was the dominion status given by Britain to the settler colonies in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, the Australia, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa. Then the third phase, the actual phase of we say the true decolonized phase, as we say, is the independence given to the Asian and African countries in the post-war period. But we have to keep in mind that even when Britain was shedding its empire, most of its colonies, in some part of the world, they were still retaining colonies. They were still consolidating their position in some other part of the world. So it was not a very blanket kind of decision to give freedom to all the colonies after the Second World War. Just never that. It took almost 2 decades for the European colonies, more than 2 decades actually, for the European colonies to get liberated from the colonial yoke. Independence of Asian, African countries like India, Pakistan, then Ceylon, Ghana, the Nigeria in 60, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago in 1962. All these were the plantation colonies actually, where normally it was we speak about the triangular route. A ship starts from a European country, will go to the African continent, will take African slaves from there, and they will be taken to the plantation colonies in the Atlantic Ocean, at the islands, mainly the Atlantic islands, and in the American mainland also. Then the slaves will be dropped there, and the resources produced through the hard labor of slaves and later indentured laborers, that will be taken to Europe. So that is how Europe became rich. So the plantation colonies also were granted independence one after another, very small colonies actually, most of them. Then Algeria became independent in 62. Then the post-colonial turn in the thought process, the ideological turn to post-colonialism, as a result of the self-reflexive thought that occurred in the 70s and 80s, triggered by post-structural deconstructive line of thinking. The post-colonial natives started questioning the status of genealogy and archaeology of knowledge that determined their present, thereby effecting a paradigmatic shift to the post-colonial thought. So we find it in the 60s, in the 70s and 80s. We find it starting in the 60s itself, but it became very prominent, visible and very prominent in the late 70s and 80s. In almost all the liberated countries, they started to think of a new metaphysics. The metaphysical, the world, the philosophy, the ideology, the worldview provided to us by the Europeans, that will perpetually keep us under their control. So we have to think of a new frame of thought. We have to think of a new line of approaching knowledge around us, and we have to interrogate the knowledge constructed by the West. So that kind of a thought became perceptible in the newly liberated colonies all across the world, and the blind spots in the colonial discourses were exploited by the scholars for deconstructing texts so as to delegitimize the existing episteme. So the entire Western epistemology, the entire Western metaphysics underwent interrogation in these liberated countries. And the concept of history with the colonizer as the dynamic master, the dynamic donor, and the colonized as the docile, very weak recipient, that became less acceptable, less tenable. Okay. And the aim of the post-colonial enterprise was not simply to find a space for the other, but to rework. This is very important. It is not to find a place for myself, but to rework the very sense of history, society, culture, and even language that silenced and excluded them as eccentric, out of the center. So it's not simply myself occupying the position earlier occupied by the Britisher. It's not simply myself becoming, say, for politically speaking, the president instead of the governor general. Not like that. We have to question the very foundation of colonial mission, the very philosophy of colonial mission, the very epistemology put forth by the colonizers. And this marginality, the binary thinking, say, for example, the center and marginal, whether I have been in the margin and I come to the center, that is not the idea. The very notion of creating center and margin, that has to be questioned. So they are actually cutting the very root of the colonial ideology, I say. Then so that's what the next what Hachian said, there are no, just go to that blue words only, there are no natural hierarchies, only those we construct. So when they say that there is a hierarchy and the white man is superior in the hierarchy, we have to understand that it is not natural. Even though they claim that it is natural, sometimes even though they claim that it's God-given, it's not like that. It is constructed by human beings. And they had power, they had authority, they were better equipped to manipulate thinking. So they created a hierarchy in such a way that they were presented as superior and we as inferior. And the next again is another significant point. The very foundations of Western rationality, such as objectivity, authenticity, scientificity, teleology, reality, etc., were thoroughly problematized by the postcolonial discourses. That is why we find in the if we go to the postcolonial novels, we find a proliferation of subjectivities rather than going for one objective narration. Most often the example that we cite is say Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, where you find multiple narrations, or in say Shadow Lines, for example, you find Amitav Ghosh, you find multiple narrations, and even the narrator's validity, the narrator's objectivity will be at stake in most of the postcolonial narratives. Authenticity is questioned, scientificity is questioned, the teleological progress question, reality instead of reality. We find literary forms like brooding over reality. We find literary forms like say magical realism being employed by the postcolonial writers very extensively. Then this is about history. I think we can skip this slide also. Just history as a narrative embodiment of a complex. This one only. See, the official version of history is tampered with. It is rewritten and realigned from the victim's point of view. This is what the postcolonialists do. That is why in literature they interrogate the representation of Africa in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Then India in Foster's A Passage to India, or Algeria in Camus' Outsider. That is all these novels. They present the Western Eurocentric view of the East, of the non-West. So that has to be, the problem is with that view. The problem is not with the country. The problem is not with the non-West. The problem is with the way in which the West, the problem is not with the East, I'm sorry. The problem is not with the East. The problem is with the way in which the West sees the East. Okay. And coming to literature, the impact of this post-colonial thought on literature, post-colonial debates on literature, we find that as Ashcroft and others argue, the three stages of transition in the post-colonial literature. Earlier, it was a stage of adopt, where the Indian writers, or say the colonized writers, imitated the ways of they imitated the way, the themes and techniques of the Western writers. Then second phase, they adapted it to make it suitable for their situation. And in the final phase, the liberation phase, they could free themselves from the Western domination in literature. So we find a shift as a result of this transition. We find a shift from the universal, general, the liberal humanist kind of thinking to the local and specific, or from the macro to the micro level. So we find the post-colonial literature, be it regional language literature or English literature, we find them addressing minor subjectivities. We find them addressing local, specific, divergent, plural identities. Okay, I'll skip, for want of time, I will skip this slide also. And see, the post-colonial perspective rejects also the notion of chronology and teleology, and celebrates ruptures, voids, fissures, and gaps. This also we can find if we go to post-colonial fiction. We will find that find a constant shuttling between the past and the present, or we find a very deliberate distortion of the sequence, the chronological sequence by the writers. The teleological pattern is often upset. The voids, the ruptures are celebrated. Even the narrator, we don't find third person omniscient narrator. Instead of that, we find different narrative voices, most often contending narrative voices coming to play in different novels. So we find the past and present and future lying intertwined, a constant shift in time frame, etc. Another point is with respect to the use of language. Which English is again a question. Whether the King's English, and the colonialism always upheld the King's English, the so-called standard English. But for the post-colonialists, language is a tool of resistance. The English language itself, they used as a tool of resistance and as a tool of subversion, as the oft-quoted Caliban statement, "You taught me language and my profit on it is I know how to curse." So we were appropriating the colonial subjects, were appropriating the colonizers' language and using it, presenting it as a tool of resistance and as a subversive tool. They abrogated and appropriated the privileges of the standard or the King's English, and appropriated it to suit their needs, their sentiments, their needs. So the Englishes, we won't find the small English with the capital E. We will find English with the small e, and that is the standard English. The King's English is disfigured, actually deliberately disfigured and destroyed, or chutnified, to use the word of Salman Rushdie. Chutnification of English happens how? By destroying the natural rhythm of the European English, the British English, excessively using punctuation marks, dislocating the syntax, scrambling the sequence, eliminating connectives, reorganizing paragraph, inserting vernacular words, not giving glossary. They do not give glossary or footnotes. by these different ways, they appropriate the privileges, they abrogate the privileges of King's English, and they make English a new language. As of now, we know that English is no longer the language of Britain, I should say, because there are more non-native speakers than native speakers uh, as far as English language is concerned. So English is a global language, and I'm very cautious when I use that word global language, because scholars like Philipson, Linguistic Imperialism and Linguistic Imperialism Continue, 2 books, they speak about how English was made a global language, the strategies of globalizing English. But anyway, my point is that English is no longer or English is not merely the language of Britain or England now. It is a language of everybody, so everybody is appropriating it in his or her own way. Then about the narrative form, the post-colonialism extensively uses narrative forms like a parody, pastiche, allegory, fantasy, magical realism, metafictional strategies, and all to contend the dominant colonial narrative modes. The nation, this also we can skip this point. I just want to mention that since colonialism and struggles against colonialism always had at the anchoring point the notion of nation. Nation is always a very, very prominent presence as far as post-colonial fiction or post-colonial literature is concerned. It always broods over nation in different forms. Just one point I thought of mentioning there. And about the terminologies also, whether to use post-colonial without hyphen or post-hyphen colonial or post-space colonial, again, there are different views. But anyway, so not reading the whole thing, but there is I don't know whether I can say that there is a consensus, but still what we often see is that the non-hyphenated or the running together term post-colonialism without space or hyphen indicates the ideological overtones of it, whereas the hyphenated term most often refer to the temporality of it. Then about the there are contending views about the post-colonial debates also. This is the last point which I want to discuss, and I'll be winding up in maybe another 2-3 minutes. Anaya Lumba speaks about in her book speaks about the diverse strains of post-colonialism. Some argue that it is another neo-colonial strategy because most of the post-colonial thinkers are European educated, English educated or French educated, and so many new generation thinkers are from the American universities, reputed universities of the world. So this is another kind of neo-colonial strategy because they have been trained in this system, in this discursive realm. Then scholars like Baba says that the relationship between colonizer and colonized is it's not very unidirectional, that very clear-cut and unidirectional, that the colonizer oppresses the colonized. No, it's not like that. It's a very ambivalent kind of relation, and he speaks about the interstitial space, the liminal space between the colonial and the colonized. So we have to think, we cannot easily reduce their identities. Rather, it's in a flux, it's in a state of it's in a very fluid state, and he highlights the notion of hybridity, as all of us know. Benita Perry argues against Baba, telling that when you speak about hybridity, you are downplaying the actual tension between the colonizer and the colonized. It's a kind of arriving at a compromise, an unwanted compromise in this discourse, and you will be, if you go for hybridity, you will be misrepresenting the entire dynamics of anti-colonial struggle. Then again, critics like Arif Dirlik, they challenge the feasibility, the very feasibility of discourses like post-colonialism. They argue that it is another, it's a language of first world post-structuralism. So it is nothing but a return to the first world languages. Deepesh Chakravarti again smells the danger of the post-colonial discourse being subsidiary to the first world discourses. Then Moore Gilbert finds two handicaps as far as the post-colonial theory is concerned. First, it conceives the metropolis as its primary audience. Second, it indirectly admits the supremacy of the West by making colonial discourse again the privileged object of analysis. And in a very recent book by Vivek Chibba, Post-Colonial Theory and the Spectre of Capital, he actually argues very strongly against most of the post-colonial theories, and saying that the main one significant point is that post-colonialism always speaks about local, regional, micro level identities, and they always speak against a grand narrative to explain the entire situation of the world. They all often allege that that is a liberal humanist kind of argument, and often downplays that kind of argument. But Chibber says that it is possible, without being Eurocentric, it is possible to have a grand narrative of colonialism and the anti-colonial struggles. So these are the ideas. The ideas that I would like to share with you. I think I have finished well within time, and there's just a reading list which you can easily locate from any source. Not something great. Just okay. So I hope Murli sir, I hope I can stop the presentation now.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Screen sharing. Okay. Okay.
So thank you, sir. It's a privilege as far as we are concerned to listen to you for the last 1 hour, and now I think we'll move on to the discussion part.
Sure.
And I think it's not an open defense, so it is only it is only a kind of getting some kind of a clarification from your part on various aspects of post-colonial writings. And let me begin with a very simple notion of what we had experienced during the late 80s or 90s. So when I went to the department, when I went to the University College department to know more about Indian writing and books related to that, they suggested M.K. Naik and Srinivasa Iyengar. We all know that the beginning, the basic books that we are supposed to. But along with that, what they suggested was the book by William Walsh, that is Commonwealth Literature.
Yeah.
So it all again, and that particular book, I don't know the exact year of publication, probably around early 70s or late 60s, William Walsh. And I think he is maybe a professor in the University of Leeds or something. I'm not very sure of the details, but when I heard you, I was reminded of that particular situation. Again, even during 1980s or 90s, we had to at that time depend on the European masters to know about our own literature. Of course, that is the condition there. So I think we will move on to a few questions that have been posted here, but I will try to save time so that we can move on to the observations by the chairperson. Yeah, so I think there are 2-3 questions from Dr. Puama, so Pushpa Puama. So I'll reduce it to major part of that. For example, the question she has asked, I think even your discussion has answered many things, but what are the main issues of post-colonial literature Is it notions of exile, cultural hybridity, migration, nation, and cultural schizophrenia? Or, and again, and the continuation of that, is it because it is capable, like, why is it important to study post-colonial literature and all that, So I think you have already explained that,
Yeah.
but I think you can add more on to what she has like made a mention about. So what is your take on that?
Okay. I think more than my explanation earlier, her question itself contains the answer to that, I think. Because, all the points that Madam has raised here, they are the concerns of post-colonial literature. I just made a mention only of nation, the concept of nation, because nation is very important. When we fight against the colonial domination, we have to conceive of for ourselves a new identity. That's what actually happened. There is often a very funny argument that Britain gave India to Indians. It is partially true if we take it in a very funny sense, because before Britain came here, India was very, there was no India actually, to speak precisely. We had very small provinces, kingdoms, different kingdoms, always at war with each other, like that. So the anti-national, the anti-colonial struggle, the nationalist struggle, united the people, and we began to think of India. So that's why I say India nation is very important. Just one example I was citing. Then what Madam said, the issue of migration becomes important, because if that migration is the result of colonial domination, again, the partition of India, we are reminded of the partition of India, where we had the large scale migration as a result of partition. Then owing to colonialism, the colonial domination, there are different kinds of forced migration, even slave trade, indentured labor, and people fleeing from their land, motherland. All those things come there, and in a way that will have its linkages with the diaspora. So then individual personal subjectivities, local identities, trying to uphold the local identity against trends of globalization, the colonial globalization, or the more contemporary neo-colonial globalization. All these things come under the purview of say post-colonialism. Then, as you said, as Madam said, the cultural hybridity, cultural schizophrenia, everything. I agree with you, ma'am. Why is it important to study post-colonial literature? Is it because it is capable of providing a representative or suppressed? Again, why is it important? I say, somebody from India, a scholar from India, cannot resist deliberating on post-colonialism, because India was under, very simple reason, India was under 200 years of colonial domination, and the entire nature of India underwent great transformation. Every aspect of life underwent transformation. Not only literature, the medical system, maybe, then the other technology, science and technology, the social system, the family notions, even the notion of family, all those underwent, all the social institutions underwent very drastic changes during the colonial process. So it's quite natural that people of the once colonized lands will think on that, they will reflect on that, and come out with fresh insights about the past experience. So that's why it's important, I think.
So Dr. Santosh, I think I would like to add one or two points there. Like you made a very clear-cut observation that in the idea of India, like before Britain. So of course there are people who now deal with revivalism. I know it's a very dangerous proposition. So I don't want to move on to that, but I agree with one thing, that is when we read our ancient narratives. So the movement of people was quite common. Say for the people going to the Ganges or maybe other pilgrim centers. So the movement, so even Adi Shankara, I think by around 780, like even in those days, he had traveled across almost most of the major states, through like along with his scholars and disciples. So the idea of networking with people and other cultures were there. Even discussion with other cultural sects were there. It was already there. Maybe from the political point of view, I think what you said is right, absolutely right. Like the idea that to create a geographical kind of a territory, that this is India, like that kind of a thing came much late. But as far as cultural like migrations are concerned, or maybe transactions are concerned, it is already there. Even we moved on to Singapore, Sri Lanka, and other maybe other parts of Asia also, as part of our journey. Maybe we may not have been good at marine kind of voyages from this part to the other part of the world, but there are certain proscriptions also. Maybe you have heard of that also. But it is, yeah, it is there.
Yeah, I just one comment on that, sir. Actually, it is there. People have been traveling across, as you said, Adi Shankara, and most of the scholars, sannyasis, they travel. But my point is, when they came to Kerala, we call it Kerala now, we call it India now. They came to the south, maybe. They can just say they came to the south. When they went to Singapore, a name Singapore or a nationality called Singapore was not there. That was my point.
Yeah. That I got, sir. Like I was only adding to the otherwise people will think that that you can be branded in a different sense. Okay. Yeah. So now I think we'll if there are no more questions, we'll move on to the observations by the chair. The chair is waiting, and I think we'll move on to that.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful deliberation, sir. Actually, when I was thinking of a passage to India, you just mentioned it. So I would like to say that E.M. Foster, the postcolonial perspective shows includes race.
Ma'am, your voice was breaking and now it's seen muted. Your mic is seen muted.
Some problem with the.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I, sir, or if it's time,
No. You can make it fast, ma'am. No problem.
Okay. In a passage to India by E.M. Foster, postcolonial perspective shows include mimicry, ambivalence, otherness, racism, and prejudice. He focused on the racial tensions and the cultural misunderstandings that divided the natives and the Anglo-Indians. What is your view on that, sir? Regarding the postcolonial perspective?
Pardon, ma'am. Just can you repeat the last part only?
He focused on the racial tensions and the cultural misunderstandings that divided the natives and the Anglo-Indians. And I remember Mrs. Moore shouting in the cave, "India is incredible," and all that with Aziz. So, what's your view on that post-colonial perspective?
My point was that that was written from the colonial perspective. That's the problem. When they say India is incredible, it is not that we cannot take it as an isolated comment, because in most of the European say narratives, you will find India as incredible, very mysterious, exotic kind of India. That means India is not very precise. India is not scientific. India is always a mystery. So when you brand something as mystery, when you brand some people as mysterious, your work is easily over. They are not people of science like that. So we have to connect that observation with the colonial discourse that Edward Said has been, for example, speaking about in talking about the Orientalizing mission. So this is one instance, one node of that kind of an argument. That was my point.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I think we'll move on to the next part of our session, and that is the introduction of our chairperson. We have with us Dr. Harpreet Kaur Karcha. Now, she is a senior professor in the Government College, Kamala Devi PG Mahila Mahavidyalaya, Chhattisgarh, and she has more than 36 years of teaching experience. And she has been a resource person, and she has chaired a lot of sessions, and she has published a lot in national and international journals. And her areas of interest are feminism, women writers, psychoanalysis, and American literature. And she has also done a project, a UGC-sponsored project related to like identifying learning disabilities and their overcomes. So and she was a member of the board of studies of universities and autonomous colleges, and she has also served as an NCC like associate NCC officer for 19 years with A grade during both pre-commission and refresher cum promotion courses like the WOTS Gwalior. And she is the president of the iSPELL Chhattisgarh forum, and she is also active in various associations and national and international forums. So it's a privilege to have with us Dr. Harpreet Kaur. And I would say, as an aside or a joke, she should have been here on 17th October because that would have coincided with her birthday. So. So on behalf of all those who have gathered here, I, with all respect, welcome Dr. Harpreet Kaur. Ma'am, it's all yours now.
Thank you, sir, Dr. Murali Krishnan. Thank you so much for such a flowery introduction. I hope I'm audible, sir.
Yeah, of course. Please go ahead.
First of all, a very good evening to all assembled on this virtual platform today. And I take this opportunity to thank iSPELL, who has given me this opportunity to and the facility to elevate myself. It's indeed an honor to be a part of this great academic endeavor that is called the Sunday Sahityik Satsang. Today, Dr. Santosh VM gave a very graphic and elaborate picture of the post-colonial debate. He talked very comprehensively, dealing with the historical and theoretical dimensions of colonial and post-colonial studies. Dr. Santosh has very deftly introduced and examined the key features of the ideologies and history of colonialism. Then he talked of the relationship of the discourse of literature, that is the impact on literature of post-colonialism, the challenges to colonialism, including anti-colonial discourses, and he has deliberated the context of the emergence of post-colonial stream of thought in theory by drawing upon the history of colonial missions and their theoretical valorization. He also threw light on the literary implication of post-colonialism, laying emphasis on the difference between the Occident and the Orient. Then he deliberated on the recent development in post-colonial theories and histories and issues of colonialism and the intersection of feminist and post-colonial thought. He has also talked of the modus operandi of colonial discourse and how colonization tried to destroy the colonized cultures by explaining it and how the colonizers, they voiced the history to the colonized people in their own voice, because earlier the colonizers did not have a voice at all. Then he also elaborated how the new colonial hegemony had replaced the cognatic terms like Commonwealth and the Third World War. He also laid stress on the situation, the post-colonial narrative modes, and the post-colonial terminology and terms. Indeed, sir, it was a very lively debate with the widest possible width of examples and illustrations. Your deliberations have given a very exemplary and comprehensive guide to the use and abuse of the term of post-colonialism and offers an original and distinctive overview of the topic, and have related the term to the larger field of cultural representations. Really, sir, you have, as they say, turned every stone. Indeed, it was a great learning experience for all of us and a very informative and enlightening session, and which we all have really benefited from it. Everything, as I said, have been covered by Dr. Santosh. We have divided the European colonies into three parts: the settlers, the non-settler countries, and the partially settled countries, which have made the debate a bit complicated, because if we divide it into these categories, I feel personally that as Canada and Australia, they are the settled countries, because it's settled over there, the colonies settled those countries. And then we have those non-settler countries like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Nigeria, and all. But partially settled countries like Africa and Zimbabwe. So these countries, is this simple division between the settler and the settler and non-settler becomes a bit difficult. And the widely divergent experiences of these countries suggest that post-colonial is a very loose term. In strictly definitional terms, for instance, the United States might also be described as post-colonial country, but it is not perceived as such because of its position of power in world politics in the present, its displacement of Native American population, and its annexation of other parts of the world in what may be seen as a form of colonization. For that matter, other settler countries such as Canada and Australia are sometimes omitted from the category of post-colonial because of their relatively shorter struggle for independence, their loyalist tendencies towards the mother country which colonized them, and the absence of the problems of racism or of the imposition of the foreign language. It could, however, be argued that the relationship between these countries to the mother country is often one of the margin to the center, making their experience relevant to a better understanding of colonialism. The debate surrounding the status of settlers' countries as post-colonial suggests that issues in post-colonial studies often transcend the boundaries of strict definition of the American Heritage Dictionary defines it as of, I quote, of relating to or being the time following the establishment of independence in a country, unquote. In practice, however, the term is used much more loosely. While the denotative definition suggests otherwise, it is not only the period after the departure of imperial powers that concerns those in the field, but that before independence as well. And moreover, those colonials include countries that have yet to achieve independence, or the people in the first world countries who are minorities, or even independent colonies that now contend with neocolonial forms of subjugation through expanding capitalism and globalization. In all of these senses, the post-colonial, rather than indicating only a specific and materially historical event, seems to describe the second half of the 20th century in general as a period in the aftermath of the heyday of colonization. Western ways of knowledge production and dissemination in the past and present then become object of study for making or seeking alternative means of expression. So as the foregoing discussion suggests, the terms thus yokes a diverse range of experiences, cultures, and problems. The resultant confusion, of course, is predictable. Now, what I'm going to deal with is, there are certain questions which suggest certain issues, which deal with the post-colonial studies and which can be explored in the for further research. And so what I think is, sir has greatly the major issues which despite the which we deal with are the how does the colonial has the effect, the impact of the colonizers on the colony one way, or were the colonizers too were affected by the colonized? Was there a vice versa influence also? Were they too influenced by the colonized people? That is a study which can be explored. And the way which we do is very difficult, and the various problems which come up, and there are many other arenas which opens to the post-colonial discourse can be identified and dealt with. Then how do these traces affect the decisions about development and modernization in post-colonies? This is another question which needs exploration. What were the forms of resistance against colonial control? And how did the colonial education and language influence the culture and identity of the colonized? Now, how did that, as we all know, even today, those who speak English have it has become a status symbol. I had one resource person talking in one of the lectures. He said, I went to the bank and I spoke in Hindi. I didn't get my way. But when I went to another bank and spoke in English, that work went very smoothly. So this is the impact of the colonizers on the colonized. So we still have an identity to make. We are grappling for our own language. So these are the various impact of this colonial effect is still there. Are we really decolonized? That is another question. Are we still retaining our own culture? That is another thing to be explored. So how did the Western science, technology, and medicine change the existing knowledge systems? As we all know, our Vedas and the science which we are famous for, neem, our grannies and mothers have been using for ages and centuries, as an antiseptic, but it was the Americans which made it a patent. So, so were we really the advancement in science? Is it really affecting the existing knowledge system, or was it India or the colonizers which affected the present science advancement? What are the emergent forms of post-colonial identities after the departure of the colonized, and to what extent has decolonization been possible? Are we really decolonized? Have we really overthrown the impact of the colonizers? These are the various issues which I think have to be addressed as far as post-colonial debates are concerned. So thank you, sir. It was a great learning experience all the way. And I thank you, iSPELL, again. And of course, Dr. Murali Krishnan and Dr. Ghansham for, I think, suggesting my name to be on this platform today. Really, it is a great opportunity and a great facility to elevate myself. I thank all once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harpreet. It was again a wonderful kind of a lecture on what all things that can be thought about as part of research and the possible milestones that we have to cover related to the topic of post-colonial studies and the areas that one can explore further. Thank you. It was a short but brilliant expression of those research areas. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And now let me call upon our mentor, guide, and leader. And that's only one and none other than Dr. Ghansham. He is there. So, sir, I think it is time for the last part of the session. It's time for presentation of certificate. And of course, your observations are also equally important. So I welcome you, sir.
Very much, sir. Hope I am audible there.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible, sir? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good evening to all. Yeah. To all those who are attending this Sunday Sahityak Satsang, and moreover, a grand welcome from iSPELL to Rotarian Dr. Santosh. It has RTN, so I could find he is a Rotarian. And as far as Rotarian service above self, that's what Rotary is called. And what iSPELL is doing the same thing. iSPELL is also a rotating kind of society wherein we facilitate to elevate people. And always iSPELL thinks of service above self. So selflessly, all of us are doing activity. Somehow or the other, through Murali Krishnan sir, we roped you in to the Sunday Sahityak Satsang, and that too with a debate on post-colonialism. Indeed, it's an interesting topic even after being independent for so long years, and every country is talking about this post-colonial attitude, post-colonialism, even have a hyphen in between the post and colonialism and without hyphen. And even the person whom you have talked about, Bill Ashcroft, has conducted Sunday Sahityak Satsang on the platform of. So all these post-colonial attitudes, all these post-colonial attributes, all these perceptions related to post-colonialism has been taken by you in such a great way that it's going to enhance many more news as far as researchers are concerned, as far as projects are concerned. Basic attempt of Sunday Sahityak Satsang is to create a kind of an impetus, create a kind of a question in the minds of the teachers, the researchers, and the students to go towards research. And as you were saying, before the Britishers came to India, there was no India. I think when the Britishers came to India, it was Bharat. And when the Britishers left Bharat, it became India. So Bharat and India, these two were there. And all these things, that too, nationalism, because when someone attacks, then only you realize where the nationalism is and how we have to coordinate, collaborate, and coordinate with each other. And then what is nationalism? When you go out of the country, then you remember India in a much greater way than when you are here. So that particular point, the nation you have brought into the focus. In Rigveda, it is said, in the beginning, there was no center. The beginning, there was no margin. And at the end, there will be no center. And at the end, there will be no margin. It will be only the universe. The demarcations will not be there. So entire thing you have brought onto the corpus of iSPELL Sunday Sahityak Satsang. And it's an honor to have you on the screen. And Murali Krishnan sir, can you enable me to share the screen?
Sorry, sir. I think Pramod, I think has not entrusted me that particular responsibility. And I think, is it with you, sir?
Harpreet Kaur ma'am, you are the host because I got disconnected in between. Yeah, can you enable me?
Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
you are the you are the host. So kindly enable me.
No, no, sir. I don't think I was the host.
No, you are the host right now. It's showing you are the host. And Murali Krishnan sir, Dr. Santosh, they are the co-host. Because disconnect. So I'm not the host.
Okay, disconnect. Disconnect. Sir, enable for what, sir? For the certificates?
If you could make me the host, I can share the screen.
Okay,
Enable me to share the screen.
okay, sir.
No,
Okay.
to share the screen. If you make me the host, then I can, I think, share the screen. Can you do that?
Sir, I'm trying.
Okay, okay.
Ma'am, please
I
click on the participant.
In my name, if
Yes,
you
sir. Nurul, could you please guide?
click find more, and in that more you can make me the host, I think. Yeah, click on my name. Yeah, click on my name, you will find more is
Right, sir.
there.
Right, sir.
And if you just click the more, you will find, I think, you can make me the host.
More.
You click the participant.
Sir, actually, your name is not displayed there. Just three dots or hyphen.
Three dots are there. Three dots are there.
Three dots, ma'am. You will find him as the fourth participant. If you go to the participant list, the fourth participant.
Yeah, my
Done, sir.
Yeah.
Done,
you are the
sir.
host.
Done, sir.
Yes, sir. It is done. Yes, sir.
is it done, ma'am?
It was done, but again,
It's done.
Pramod Thangle sir is the host now. I
Hello.
think he can help.
So it's done from this end.
Pramod sir is back. Pramod sir, please make sir host.
Host. I have made sir the host. It's showing. It's on this. It's displaying on the screen as a sir is the host.
Sir
Yes,
is the
sir. Yes,
host.
sir.
I said the
Yes,
host.
ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay, ma'am. Now, Pramod Hengle has
Yes, sir. You are now
become
host.
the host.
You may present.
Hello.
Sir, you are now host, please.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
You are host. You are now a host.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, right, sir. Is my screen visible, sir? Is my screen visible?
Yes, now starting.
It has come up. It has started.
Yes.
You have started screening. Like screen sharing now.
Okay. Now is it okay, sir?
Yes, now
Yes, yes.
visible,
Is it
sir.
okay?
It's okay. It's okay. It's wonderful. It's there.
Okay. Right. So on behalf of Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature, we really feel honored to have Dr. Santosh on the platform of iSPELL. So this certificate, a token of appreciation, gratitude, and love from iSPELL, sir. Kindly it, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I feel honored to have this.
Santosh, sir.
Yes, sir. I hope I am
Sir,
audible
thanks.
to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
And for doing, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. For doing the honors as the chairperson of today's deliberation on Sunday Sahityik Satsang. This certificate goes to Dr. Harpreet Kaur for doing another wonderful presentation on Postcolonial debate. Ma'am, this certificate to you. Accept it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. I'm really honored and privileged. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. This month, that's what we call the October, the end event. October was done by Murali Krishnan, and in the beginning, Dr. Santosh was in the month of October. Today is the day of October. So all the octopus means Dr. Murali Krishnan has used everything to manage the risk persons, to the chairpersons, to manage the master of ceremonies. And October was full of octopus task for Murali Krishnan, sir. So this certificate of appreciation goes to Dr. Murali.
Thank you, sir. It's a surprise, but
Kindly
thank
accept
you.
it, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir. And on next Sunday, we are going to have another treat. And this treat is in the poetry short stories, and the are use this platform of iSPELL to play their show their creativity in the form of their, and just celebrate this event, because all the time we are conducting lectures and talks, and now we are giving the way to the creative activity to showcase on the platform of iSPELL. So this is our next. So do join us at the time from Indian Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature, where we say iSPELL. When you start something, when you start combining with the people, then it we, and when we spell, what we do is I feel. I feel another venture of iSPELL, and I feel is international forum of English education and literature. This was formed simultaneously with iSPELL. So we have two associations. One is Indian iSPELL and another one is International Association I Feel. Those who are interested can join iSPELL and I Feel. When you spell, then you start feeling. Whenever you say iSPELL, then you have to say I feel. So let us all feel this iSPELL within ours. With that, I thank each one of you for joining on this platform of I. Thank you much on behalf of iSPELL. I request each one of you to take care of yourself, take care of your family, and take care of academics also, because we have moved from pandemic to pan-academic. So let us all celebrate this pan-academic and let us go beyond our so-called margins and boundaries to make the stakeholders understand what education is all about. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.